One of the curious things about political opinions is how often the same people line up on opposite sides of different issues. The issues themselves may have no intrinsic connection with each other. They may range from military spending to drug laws to monetary policy to education. Yet the same familiar faces can be found glaring at each other from opposite sides of the political fence again and again. That's how Thomas Sowell's book Conflict of Vision starts. Sowell argues the reason for this curious phenomenon is because both groups of people have fundamentally different assumptions about human nature and human abilities. These set of assumptions are rarely acknowledged or even recognized as influencing people's opinions on such a wide variety of issues. But once you understand the conflict of visions, you understand this ideological battle that has been raging for centuries. So, in order to understand this conflict of visions, we first need to understand what a vision is. A vision is a pre-analytic cognitive act. Well, no, scratch that. A vision is like your gut feeling of how the world works. Essentially, it's a set of assumptions about human nature and our capabilities. These set of assumptions give us simple formulas so that we can understand, or at least believe we understand, how the world works and why people do what they do. For example, let's say we have two people arguing about why we go to war with each other. You could get two completely different answers that stem from different visions. For example, person A might say, well, wars occur because people are people. We're greedy, lustful, and generally a pretty terrible bunch, and that's not going to change. Frankly, it's amazing we ever made it out of the savannah without murdering each other, trying to get to the other side of the continent first. Person B might respond with, no, you're wrong. People are inherently good and rational. War only occurs because we have these large institutions like organized religion and corporations and governments that end up creating paranoia, fear, or misunderstandings that override our reason and lead us to go to war. Both people are, ideally, trying to figure out how to prevent war, but you can see how their completely different visions or underlying assumptions of people are people versus people are good and rational would cause them to reach completely different conclusions about how to go about preventing war. This is the conflict of visions. It's a set of assumptions you have, often never thought about, that influence your thinking on how the world works and how to fix it. Since visions are so rarely examined but have such a profound impact, Sowell states that the purpose of his book is to think about them. Sowell describes what could be thought of as a spectrum for visions. On the one side of this vision spectrum is constrained, and on the other side is unconstrained. I personally think it's easier to look at the two sides as limited and unlimited, but he wouldn't call them that. In reality, visions can be anywhere on this spectrum. For example, Marxism is actually a hybrid of both visions, whereas fascism is in multiple places at once, it seems. But for ease of understanding, the spectrum of all possible visions is split up into two distinct groups to illustrate the differences. The goal for public policy people of either vision is usually to create the best outcome for society. The problem is the core assumptions are so different from each other that they never end up agreeing on the same way to get to the same destination. At the core of each vision is some belief about human nature. Essentially, what are people's ultimate potential? Both visions see the base or starting point of human nature as flawed and imperfect, that people are selfish and just barely smart enough to get by. The constrained vision doesn't see these factors as changing. It says our base nature will always be that of a self-centered, just smart enough person. The unconstrained vision sees the exact opposite. Yes, it says people start off by being just smart enough and self-centered, but we can change our human nature to be closer and closer to perfection. This is a critical difference in assumptions between the two visions. Everything else flows out like a logical ripple from here. Again, both visions believe human nature is flawed. The constrained vision sees human nature as unchanging, that we can try all we want to make people inherently unselfish or inherently smarter, but that's doomed for failure. This is in stark contrast to the unconstrained vision that sees human nature as capable of continuous improvement. Yes, we start out as being selfish and just smart enough, but we can learn to shed our selfishness and improve our intelligence. Alright, let's let this intellectual rubber meet the road of reality. In reality, we all want stuff. Stuff isn't actual stuff, like food, clothes, cars, etc. but also stuff that's harder to define. Things like justice, security, love. Furthermore, these wants, Soul calls them desires, are unlimited. Once we get some shelter, we want more and better shelters, perhaps even a home. Maybe our own private island one day. Once we get rid of the big injustices, we get angry at the smaller ones. We're selfish after all. The constrained vision recognizes that we have these unlimited desires, but we run into a problem because our human nature is so limited intellectually and morally that we can't get everything we want. Crucially, it also says that we won't tolerate these limitations on our desires, except when there are other powers that force us to. These other powers are called social processes. Social processes serve two primary roles. Firstly, they help to limit the amount of pain that we cause each other. For example, social processes are things like religion, that say we shouldn't steal things from each other or else, or government, that punishes us if we do steal. But social processes not only serve this restricting role, limiting the amount of pain that we cause each other, but also help to elevate us above our base nature and help to advance the human race. For example, prices in a free market economy are a social process that helps coordinate what people want or desire with what entrepreneurs will end up creating. Common languages give us the means to communicate to find solutions to complex problems. The cultural tradition of simple politeness helps everyday interactions be just more pleasant and enjoyable. Even things like moral traditions, cultural habits, aversions, attractions can all be social processes that help elevate us above our base nature. These social processes weren't designed by some philosopher king 2,000 years ago. Rather, they grew out of the experiences, wisdom, and hard lessons learned of people over time. Each generation, in a sense, adds to this body of knowledge by their experiences and ends up discarding subconsciously or consciously what becomes outdated over time. Sometimes knowledge is passed down explicitly, like in the Ten Commandments. But even when this does happen, says the constrained vision, it's usually just someone writing down what everybody kind of already knows. They're in a sense just codifying what people already practice. So to sum up, the constrained vision has a pretty poor view of humans' ability to change our base nature. Essentially, we can't really. And since we have these unlimited desires, social processes, in a sense, make up the difference, helping to advance society and keep us from hurting each other more. Alright, enough of that. Let's see what the unconstrained vision has to say. The unconstrained vision sees things quite simply. Yes, it says, we have unlimited desires, but our human potential is limitless. By shedding our selfish nature and improving ourselves morally, we can freely accept any suffering we ourselves might feel if the outcome means a better society. And by increasing our intellectual power, we can figure out many solutions to our desires. All we need to do is compile all the relevant knowledge together and use our brain power to figure it out. Critically, to the unconstrained vision, knowledge is facts, figures, logical arguments, and anything that can be articulated rationally. Social processes, or the wisdom of the ages, or whatever the constrained vision wants to call it, is not knowledge. The goal is to get everyone to this intellectual and unselfish plane of existence eventually. But it's inevitable that some people are going to arrive here first. And when they do, they view it as their responsibility to use their intellectual abilities and unselfish moral nature to make the best decisions for these other people, the unwashed masses, since they don't understand what is best for them. And until such a time when they also can make the best decisions for themselves, they'll use their morally superior and intellectual superhuman ability to make decisions for them. You can see how that one difference earlier about the potential of man is already causing a major split between the two visions. The constrained vision believes it's human nature to have unlimited desires, but that our limited intelligence and selfishness keep us from being able to satisfy them all. So in order to cope with this limited base nature, humans have learned lessons over time from hard-won experience about what to do to best contain our dangerous and selfish impulses, but also constructively channel human energies towards creating ever higher levels of prosperity. These experiences become integrated into social processes like traditions and morals and prices, etc. The constrained vision views this experience as a form of knowledge. Even though it's not facts, figures, or logical arguments, it can be just as useful and even more so sometimes. It shouldn't be surprising, of course, that the unconstrained vision reaches the complete opposite conclusion. Of course our desires are unlimited, it says, but people can improve their intelligence and shed their unselfish nature. So, what we need to do is find the best solutions for society by 1. Improving ourselves, and 2. Compiling all the relevant facts, figures, and rationally finding a solution. Of course, it's inevitable that some people will reach this higher level of understanding before others, and until everyone is smart enough and morally committed enough to make the right decisions, these intellectual and morally superior pioneers will have to make the best decisions for everybody else. Critically, the unconstrained vision doesn't need social processes or the wisdom of the ages. If things cannot be justified rationally using specifically articulated reasons, then it shouldn't exist. Now it's easy to see how these different visions about men's ability can virtually predict the answer to any number of huge questions. Let's take the most basic of questions. Who should choose? Well, the constrained vision, with its view that no one is really any smarter than anybody else, or that much more moral, says that everybody should be allowed to choose for themselves what is best. They could make their decision based off of their morality or spirituality, or they could just follow the money, or they could just follow tradition. It doesn't really matter how they end up deciding. What is important is that they're all contributing to these social processes which help advance society towards ever higher levels. The unconstrained vision, with its view that human intelligence and moral potential is huge, says that anyone who's strengthened their mind to be an intellectual powerhouse and possesses the requisite moral commitment can effectively and unbiasedly reason out what is best. In reality, not everyone will reach this superior level of human all at once. So, the intellectual and moral elite should make the best decisions for everybody else who's either too dumb to understand or not morally committed enough. Amusingly, you can also see how these different visions even affect the insults that different sides throw at each other. People with the constrained vision will often see the other side as truly being sincere about their desire to change the world, but they don't realize that they're being naive, that they're simply too inexperienced to understand that you're going against human nature and that your plan is simply never going to work. People with the unconstrained vision will often counter with accusations that those with the constrained vision are corrupt or dumb or clinging to outmoded ideas, because the only logical reasons for someone to disagree with them are 1, they're being paid off by somebody, or simply haven't morally committed themselves to finding the best solution. 2, aren't smart enough to see the truth. Or 3, don't really realize that social processes aren't wisdom, but simply traditions that have been carried on that have no basis in reason. And if they can't be justified with reason, then they shouldn't exist. Hopefully this brief summary piqued your interest in the book, because this is really just the tip of the vision iceberg. I've only skimmed the surface of what Thomas Sowell goes over in this book. In addition, he goes into much greater detail on both visions, and even explains how words that we typically think only mean one thing, like freedom or justice, mean completely different things to both of the visions. So, if you like this summary, please go purchase the book from Amazon. If you use my Amazon affiliate link below, I get a little kickback, which helps me make more videos like this one. If you want to get notified when I post a new video, then go ahead and sign up for my email newsletter, and I'll send you an email when a new one comes out. Thanks.